Writing about hope, I have come to realize, is a strange exercise. It almost always requires bringing up some dismal story. To start off this month with the theme of hope, I started talking about the story of Anne Frank hiding from Nazi powers in Europe. In past sermons, I've talked about hope in comparison to slavery and world wars. I've talked about it in the face of addiction and loneliness. Hope tends to be defined in contrast to our challenges. And the more dramatic the challenge is, the more striking the hope appears. The challenges of life are many, and they are varied, and they change over time. Good, it seems, is a very relative thing. Through Friends of Orange County Detainees, several Tapestry members have visited with people in immigration detention. Sometimes it's a single visit. Sometimes we visit the same person for months, even years. And as you might imagine, life in detention is difficult. The immigration process, even for good cases, is an emotional roller coaster. As we visit people in detention, we accompany them on that roller coaster. And as circumstances change, so does hope. Of course, everyone's hope is to build a life here in America and probably reunite with family. When that seems distant, though, sometimes hope is for a more lenient judge or a good attorney. Sometimes hope is for a decent cellmate. Sometimes hope is getting your favorite flavor of soup at the commissary. When the grand hope of next month seems too impossible, hope for today is sometimes more sustaining. From what I've seen, an ability to maintain hope, even when it changes, even hope in something that might seem incredibly small, is essential to the survival of our spirit. Many of us, I know, have accompanied our friends or family members through a course of illness. Especially in the case of a terminal illness, hope adjusts to the reality of life circumstances. Hope isn't for the impossible to happen. Hope is for the best possible outcome. That may mean getting some sunshine, or a comfortable night's sleep, or an hour with good friends. Even while the object of hope changes, the power of it and the necessity for it remain strong. As I was thinking about hope this week, it struck me that it's a little bit like water. It takes the shape of whatever it's allowed to. In those lovely moments when life seems full of possibility, hope can fill us like a great jug. On the more difficult days, when our vision is less grand, the best we can do is allow it to seep down into the cracks wherever it finds space. As long as we make some room for it, it will flow in. I'm starting to think that maintaining hope isn't so much a project of defining it or having a particular vision. Maintaining hope mostly demands that we make room for it in our lives. Depending on the circumstances, we may be only able to have a crack here and there, but as long as there's a little space, hope will find its own shape. So instead of dreaming up some desired outcome, we might do better by removing those preconceived barriers to success, the false limits, the trap of pessimism. Life is tough enough. There are plenty of very real, concrete limits to achieving what we want. We owe it to ourselves to stop conjuring up fake limitations to our fulfillment. Last week on Christmas Eve, I said that we are an incurably hopeful faith tradition. We believe that every soul is sacred. Every person is worthy of the opportunity to thrive. That commitment is the primary thing that drove Unitarians to define themselves as a separate faith tradition. We didn't always call ourselves Unitarians, of course. For a few years, the word Unitarian was used as an insult, used to describe those super liberal Christians at Harvard. And after years of being insulted with the word, finally in 1819, William Ellery Channing preached the sermon, Unitarian Christianity. And for the first time, he accepted that word. And he said, okay, this is what it means. He started to define this new liberal faith tradition and how it was different from the orthodoxy of the day. Now, it's important to know what the rest of Christians were thinking in those days, and it was all about predestination. It was believed that humans could be saved from the fiery pits of hell. That feels really weird to say in this space. Only by the grace of God. No thought or action of their own doing could save us or improve our situation. It was all up to God's seemingly arbitrary will. And Channing said, no, hold on a minute. First of all, we have reason. We have this great capacity as human beings, and we're going to use that reason because we have it. It would be a waste not to. Second of all, he argued that we are all capable of moral development, and this development, above all, should be the goal of religious life in America. Channing would say that every soul is sacred and worthy of the opportunity to flourish in this life, the opportunity to develop character and to find fulfillment. Like I said, he delivered that sermon in 1819. In terms of social equality, that was a different world. Understanding that every person had the potential for moral development meant that the social and literal bondage of the day prevented people from fulfilling their God-given potential. So he railed against slavery, against poverty, against alcoholism. He advocated for the creation of hospitals for people with disabilities, and he encouraged progressive education. The first American minister to proudly wear the label Unitarian was a committed activist, and his commitment to those causes was based in his hope for every person to have an opportunity to grow in intellect and moral character. From our beginnings, our faith tradition sets our sights on the possibility for each person to flourish. And we've made it our mission to protect that opportunity for every person. Sometimes our hopefulness gets mistaken for optimism. This is important. Our predecessors didn't believe that we were all flat out good people, end of sentence. It wasn't that simple. They believed that everyone has potential for growth. And anything that hampered that potential, particularly slavery or lack of education, and I would add to the list lack of health care, was an offense. Those limits are an offense not just to the individual or the community. Unnecessary limits to human potential are an offense to the goodness of creation. For those early Unitarians, faith communities were in the business of removing the limits to human flourishing. They did that by campaigning for social justice movements and by nurturing personal growth in their faith community. Here in this room today, the bondage that limits our capacity for growth is as much self-imposed as it is societal. The limits we face have as much to do with our own cynicism and preconceptions of what is possible as any real limits created by our situation. And so I wonder, how might we as a community take on the task of supporting one another's growth? How might we help our neighbors recognize the pessimism that limits their hope and expel it from all our lives? What if we named it boldly? When it seems that our friend sees only the limits to success, when she imagines all the ways in which we might fail, when he doesn't identify opportunities because he's only able to see challenges, we should name that pessimism for what it is. For our friend's sake and for our own, we should name the unnecessary barriers to hope. I claim no superiority or expertise in this department, quite the opposite. This request for identifying one another's unnecessary negativity is for myself as well. I know that cynicism, outrage, negativity are easy and seductive emotions, especially today. Sometimes social media seems to be nothing more than a steaming pile of outrage and anger. The more outrageous the Facebook post or news story, the more attention it garners. Outrage is a strangely infectious emotion. That's partly because it's an easy, lazy emotion. It doesn't require a lot of critical thought or complexity of emotional depth. We just pick up our torch and pitchfork and start shouting along with them. In such a culture, those thoughts and feelings seep into our consciousness and eventually into our words and actions. If we're going to live life differently, we need one another to point out the inflated negativity in our own words and our own actions. We need one another's help to make room for hope in our lives. Remember, I said hope is like water. It may rush in to fill us at times of great opportunity, or it might trickle in to fill in the cracks in our times of challenge. Hope will come to us in all kinds of surprising forms if we make some room for it. It's no coincidence that I'm delivering this sermon about hope on New Year's Eve. Some of us are in the process of making resolutions. Most of us are, at least in some ways, reflecting on the past year and considering how we will engage with 2018. I invite you to bring cultivating hope into your reflection for the turning year. Maybe, like me, you will set it as an intention to make more room for hope. I plan to spend more conscious effort addressing the unnecessary and unfounded negative thoughts, to make room for hope, to seep in and take whatever shape it will. If it's not part of your primary agenda for 2018, Just know that hope is an invaluable component for achieving whatever intentions you have set. This year, may we be blessed with hope in all its different shapes. And may this community have the courage and compassion to address those imaginary limits, to remove those stumbling blocks from one another's paths. Amen.